few words about Bitcoin is decentralization. So you have Bitcoin is a network, right? So you have different kinds of networks. One would be this kind of network, and another would be this kind of network. So this is a centralized network, right? There's a central entity somewhere here, and all the others talk to each other through this entity. And this is a decentralized network. So people, I mean, the members of the network just talk to each other. And Bitcoin is like this, right? And what's the point of all this, right? One point would be something that I mentioned earlier. Bitcoin is, for example, Bitcoin is always up, right? Bitcoin is never down. Why is that? Because there's no such point. If you have PayPal and somebody hacks PayPal's servers, for example, then this point is down, right? And nobody can do anything with this network then. This is true for all centralized networks. If there's a center, there's a problem. I mean, there's a potential for problems. Well, here, there's no center. So if one of those guys is not online, then there's not a problem. That's no problem for the whole network. So everybody's equal in this network. There's no central entity, and if there's no central entity, there's no place for attacks or honest mistakes or corruption. And so all central networks have a great target for, let's say, attacks or corruption, or even people make mistakes. Right? So, but in decentralized networks like this, there's no place for this kind of stuff. And that's why it's more robust and resilient. Another thing maybe to stress about Bitcoin is some people think Bitcoin is anonymous. Bitcoin can be quite private, so you can use it in privacy without disclosing who you are when you use it. But on the other hand, it can also be used with high transparency, much higher transparency than the other existing networks. So what does this mean? So this, whether you can choose whether you use it in the it's a spectrum, right? You can choose the way you use it determines where on the spectrum you will be. You can be either very private or very transparent or something in between. And this depends on how you use it. We've seen that all transactions and all addresses in Bitcoin are public, and they're public forever. So if you take one transaction like this, from send 3 Bitcoins from one address to another, the question of transparency or privacy boils down to disclosing who owns an address. So everybody can see that this transaction happened, but by default nobody knows who owns this address or this address. But then of course people who use this address, who own this address, so who own private keys, can decide whether to disclose their identity and associate it with this address. This is done outside the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin network has no notion of identity. But you can always publish your Bitcoin addresses on Facebook, for example. So people, if you do that, people will always know which transactions you make, when you make them, how much you make them, and to which addresses you send them. So users themselves can disclose their own addresses and become transparent. Or the people who the users transacts with can disclose their addresses, right? So, for example, if I own this address and I receive a Bitcoin, I receive this transaction from this address, and I know who this person is, I can disclose this, right? I mean, I can post on Facebook, however. So this is disclosed outside Bitcoin network. And if I do this, then this person is not has lost a piece of their privacy, right? Because now it's known that this address belongs to them. But of course, a person can use many addresses, so they will just make other transactions from other addresses. Let's see some examples. Okay, I didn't. Charities are one example for companies that might want to disclose their addresses, and so they can operate transparently. They can say, okay, we received this much money. This is what we use it for. BTMs, for example, if you purchase some Bitcoins on that BTM, you will see its address, and then you can just track. You can see how many transactions were made in the past and in the future. Okay, a few words about mining. Here's another mining year. Actually, there are several of them. So what is mining? Mining in Bitcoin has 2 roles. One is transaction processing. So when you make a transaction, somebody has to it has to become public knowledge and it has to be confirmed that it's valid, and that's what miners do. And another role is that new bitcoins are created in mining. So that's why people do it then, because they get the new bitcoins that are created. So anyone can mine. You just buy one of those machines and plug it in, and the new bitcoins are created, and some of those you will get if you're right. In the past, you could use your PC to do that. Today, PCs are, normal personal computers are too weak, and you need to buy specialized hardware to do this. And mining is a mathematical process that verifies transactions and reaches agreement on which transactions are valid. So miners are those who receive also the transaction fees that are paid with particular transactions. Okay, so what's going on with Bitcoin in Slovenia? Bitstamp is a company that used to be, this is a Slovenian company that used to be largest dollar Bitcoin market. Now it's one of the largest still. There are 3 BTMs in Ljubljana. In September, there was a large business conference on Bitcoin in Ljubljana. Some stores, coffees, restaurants accept Bitcoin. We have Bitcoin Association of Slovenia, and we have a Slovenian chapter of the International Bitcoin Foundation, which is one of our sponsors today. There are several startup companies in Slovenian space, two of which we'll see later on. And also the officials, they issued a few notes. The tax authorities in December 13 and the AML authorities in January 14. And I think they're generally considered as friendly enough for Bitcoin. Okay, now one thing I want to talk, this is maybe a bit more involved topic, but I think it's very important for example, for the startup space about Bitcoin. And this is smart contracts, also called programmable money. So Bitcoin is programmable money. What does this mean? It means that in Bitcoin, you can set some money sent to some kind of an address, and you can set up conditions that determine when this money can be transferred on. And these conditions are then executed and enforced by the Bitcoin network. I will give you a few examples. But first, what it's about. This reduces the need for trusted third parties, for example, like law enforcement. So the title is smart contract. So these conditions that are here, they constitute a kind of a contract, but it's not just written on paper. That then has to be somehow checked and enforced by, I don't know, judges and law enforcement. But it's actually checked and enforced by the Bitcoin network, by the protocol itself. So you need less. This reduces the need for law enforcement, for intermediaries who hold other people's money, like insurance companies, banks, escrow providers, casinos, and stuff like this. We'll see a few examples. The first example I'd like to show you is insurance contracts, or this is like Kickstarter type contracts. Lighthouse is a recently released piece of software that you can install on your computer for this. And what it provides is Kickstarter style funding, right? So, okay, who doesn't know Kickstarter? Okay, everybody knows Kickstarter. So the point of all this is that you want to raise a certain amount of money, and if you don't get that money. Like you say, okay, I want to raise $20,000, and if people just pledge $10,000, then you don't get anything. But if you raise $20,000 or more, then you'll get the people's money. But the way Kickstarter does it, if you've done it, you know that they take a lot of fees, right? The Kickstarter themselves take fees, and also the payment processors. They used to use Amazon payments. Now they use something else. I'm not sure, but those payment processors always take some fees. And also it's centralized, so Kickstarter decides which projects they will take and which they will not. Right? And Lighthouse provides this, but without the intermediary, without the company, which in the Kickstarter case is Kickstarter. You can, so this is all just between the person who creates the funding project and the people who pledge money to them. Right? There's no other intermediary. When using Bitcoin for this, you get all the Bitcoin benefits that we mentioned, so fast transactions, safe, cheap, and everything. So yeah, free for anyone can use it. It's not like somebody will decide if your project is good or not. You just create your project and send it to people, and they will either pledge or not. And maybe the most important thing here is that no third party ever holds the funds. With Kickstarter, there's always those, you know, if you there's either Visa or your bank or Kickstarter themselves who holds the funds that the people pledge before it releases them to the project owner, right? But here, with Lighthouse, this is not the case. The project is entirely between the creator of the project and their pledgers. There's a screenshot here from Lighthouse. So what you do is this is an app that you just create on your, you just install on your computer and you create a project there. And then you can distribute your project to potential pledgers any way you want. You can send it on via email, you can post it on Facebook or on some service or whatever, it doesn't matter. There's no Kickstarter that would say, okay, these projects are good, these are not. You can do whatever project you like. And then people will pledge, and the thing is that until the total amount that you requested is achieved, then the pledgers retain complete control over the money. They can always get their money back. There's no one who can hold their money. But when there are enough pledges so that you raise the I don't know, $20,000 that you set out to raise, then you can just click a button here and get that money. And no third party will ever hold your funds. Right? So it's either yours or the pledges. So that's one use case of Bitcoin. Another very interesting thing I think is multi-signature transactions. The point of this is shared access to funds. So it's possible to create money, to put money in some place in such a way that moving this money on, spending this money requires consent of several members. So for example, you could have a Bitcoin address that a special kind of Bitcoin address that has a special kind of lock with 3 keys, right? And then you distribute these keys among 3 persons, and you can decide, for example, that 2 persons are needed to unlock this key, so to send the money somewhere. This is called 2 out of 3 multi-signature transaction. So any 2 of these 3 keys are needed to spend this money. And one good potential use case of this is trustless escrow. So basically, what is escrow? It's used when 2 people are making a transaction, like somebody's selling something and the other person is buying it. So let's say this person will buy this person some money and this person will give them a camera, for example, like on eBay or something. This is no escrow transaction, but if you want, now the problem is here, they don't trust each other, who will send their part first, right? So to solve this problem, traditionally, you could use a third person that holds this money until the good is released. So it works like this, that this person holds the money to the escrow provider, the second person, this is the seller, sends the goods to the buyer, and the buyer confirms that the goods are received, then the escrow provider will release the money to the seller. This is a service that, for example, PayPal or eBay provide. But the problem here is that these 2 persons have to trust this person to release the money and to not be biased and things like this. And Bitcoin provides via this multi-signature feature an option to reduce this trust that's needed. So the way it works with Bitcoin is this person would put the money in a special kind of address, so like this box with 3 keys, and these keys would then be distributed among these 3 persons. And the difference here is that this person now never has access to the funds. They can only decide whether to send the funds in the end to this person or not, but they cannot send the funds anywhere else. So they cannot really, they cannot access these funds. They cannot steal them or whatever. And also another thing is that if everything goes well, so if the goods are sent to the buyer and received there, everything is fine, then this person doesn't even have to do anything, because these two persons, the buyer and the seller, have two keys, and these two keys are enough to send the money to the seller. So actually, the role of this third person, the escrow provider, is very much reduced, which is good because this can potentially reduce prices and friction and everything. So this is just a recap of what I just told. So existing escrow services are really expensive, require trust. They may be biased, and there could be vendor locking. Like if you're buying on eBay, then you're going to use their escrow services, so they can charge whatever they want for it. Whereas with Bitcoin, Bitcoin actually enables. It doesn't solve all these issues. It does solve this one. You don't require to trust anyone. And it enables a market of escrow services, which then in turn can make other things better. Okay, perhaps just a list of some other applications of smart contracts. If you want to learn more about this, there's a great talk from Mike Kern from the Bitcoin 2012 London conference. So a few more examples, just quickly. One would be roaming Wi-Fi, so you could just go abroad and buy Wi-Fi from the people who already have Wi-Fi routers on the streets, right? Everybody who lives there, they have routers, but they're locked. You cannot use that, but using Bitcoin, this could be created so that they could provide, open up their Wi-Fi services for payment in Bitcoin. Inheritance, let's say you could put some money aside so that your heirs, so your grandchildren can inherit this money at some point in time. This could be programmed in Bitcoin. Smart property, like the cars that only drive if let's say the payment for the car has been made. Betting or casinos could be made with less trust online on Bitcoin protocol. Insurance, some insurance contracts could be coded in Bitcoin, and other things like loans, bonds, stock markets. It could be done here. So what I want to say here is this offers great potential for tech companies, for IT companies to develop this kind of services. I think there's a huge market. I think this is going to be developed. There's going to be much work on this in the future. There's some things already done, but there's still a vast space of things that have not been done, even though we already know that they could be done. So the opportunities here, I think, are really large. Okay, so this is all from me.